Hello and welcome to Find, Tell, Share, the Storytellers podcast. I'm Jemma Rosenthal and my business is Creative Hearts. I'm a singer-songwriter, dancer, choreographer, actor, soon-to-be author and speaker, just all things creative. And on this show, we talk about everything storytelling. Here is my co-host.
And I'm Chris Sissons. My business is Market Together. I'm a local marketing coach who specialises in using stories for marketing, business development, and finding the real work that only you can do. And this time, later in the programme, I shall be reading a short story I wrote a few weeks ago. It covers an aspect of my life from the age of 13 through to the present, and some of the changes that have happened in Sheffield over that time. And Jemma is going to be telling us about a song that she's working on about abundance that raises questions about earning money and the purpose of our businesses. But before all of that, Jemma, tell us about our guest.
Thanks, Chris. I'm delighted today to introduce our guest, Ruth McIntosh. While some people dream of fast cars and a luxury lifestyle, Ruth's dream is to free will around ancient towns in the south of France, soaking in the atmosphere. She tells us that riding her bike makes her feel like a kid again, and she's a great advocate of travelling slowly, taking in the view. When she's not cycling or dreaming about it, she's an online English tutor, content writer, and brand storyteller who lives in South Sheffield, just on the border to Derbyshire. Her business is called Good Apple Copy, and she calls herself the Good Apple. After 20 years as a teacher, she now works one-on-one with individuals to build their confidence. In addition to website and magazine content, she also works on life writing projects for people wanting to self-publish their memoirs and her own books on slow cycling. So, welcome, Ruth.
Hello, Jemma.
Thank you. We're so happy to have you on today. I know we were talking last week with you about your new book, In Search of Adventure, Stories About Women Who Cycle. So could you just talk a little bit about how that came about? I know you're going to talk about your story in a bit, but just a brief introduction.
Absolutely. Well, actually, I've got Chris to thank for this story, for this book that I wrote. So I was chatting to Chris about a year ago. It would be last kind of April, May. And Chris was asking me really what kinds of stories did I most want to write about. And I gave it quite a lot of thought because I've been writing brand stories for other businesses and LinkedIn profiles and testimonials and really enjoying it. And I found a kind of niche in the short story kind of market. And I felt like I wanted to write something for fun, which I've always felt a little bit as well. If you don't write for fun, then I don't think you should write for business as well. I had a website called Slow-Cycle for a couple of years, where I've just been writing up various trips that I've been doing on the bicycle. And I decided that what I really wanted to do was some writing about women who had got me into cycling, who I really wanted to say a big thank you for, particularly a lady called Indigo Kelly Forrest and another lady called Susan Dorham. So it was really from the thing that I most wanted to write about that my book came about, and it was a great project to do in lockdown, actually.
Fantastic. I know you spoke about it being a lockdown project. What got you into writing? Even were you a writer before this project? I know you talked about being an English tutor and content writer. What sparked that writing passion for you?
I've been enjoying creative writing for years, and I spend a lot of time reading. Some weeks I'll read 3 or 4 books a week, so I'm an avid reader, absolutely avid reader. After I finished teaching, I went to work in a bookshop at the National Trust just so that I could get my hands on more books. Writing was a kind of natural progression. And it's just a mixture of wanting to get to know people, really, and also sort of polishing up writing so that I've got a portfolio of things that I can show people in terms of what I can do for them and telling their story. Because one of the things that I like to do is speak up for small businesses and people who don't necessarily always get to speak up for themselves because they don't particularly like writing. So it's that kind of desire to advocate for people that got me into the storytelling element. Also, last lockdown, last May and June, I wasn't feeling very well. So I wasn't actually physically getting out and about. I lost my job for a charity, which was face-to-face working with adults with learning disabilities. So there had a bit of a gap, really, and it was something that just kind of came about due to a number of things coinciding at the same time.
Yeah. So sorry, I thought you were going to carry on more. That's what I was.
No, just wondering.
No, it's all really it's all really interesting what you're saying about helping businesses who may not be into writing as much, but want to get their story out. And I'd like to hear more about how you help people who are wanting to self-publish.
That's something that's going to come after this book. At the moment, I've gained a lot of information after going through the whole self-publishing process. I made it difficult for myself by doing it all on my own. So starting up a publishing company to publish the book and launching it onto Ingram Spark and also Amazon. So I've been through the process, if you like, as a dry run. So what I'm able to do now is take people's memoirs, their recollections, their photographs, their poetry, whatever it is, and put that all together as a book because the technology is there available digitally for you to do that. And it's just a lovely thing for you to do for yourself and for your family and for posterity, that kind of thing, preserve your story. Also, if people forget or they don't get the chance to see loved ones in lockdown or they don't get the chance to tell their story anymore, I think it's really nice to get it down as an audio format or as a book and collate those memories so that at later dates, it's there for you. It must be very difficult for people in lockdown who didn't get the chance to meet up with their loved ones and tell those stories and keep that tradition going. And even more so, if somebody passes early, then, and you haven't prepared for them going, it will be very sad and awful thing to happen. So I think it's a lovely project for anyone to do at some point to write down their memoirs. And it can be gathering not only their family history, but histories before that. So as I said, the technology is available. Is something that I'm looking to do to offer the life writing story service. And the lovely thing about it is that you get to go and talk to people, to interview them like you are with me today, and they get to tell you anecdotes. Because what's really driving my interest in stories is listening to people. And as a university student, I was absolutely passionate about dialectology. I love different accents and dialects. One of the reasons why I was drawn to Sheffield, because they're an excellent department with some brilliant dialectologists in it, including John Widdowson. Some people might know him out there, some people might not, but he was an absolute superstar and a brilliant raconteur. So I've had a lifelong love of listening to other people, and it is listening to different voices rather than the mainstream.
Yeah, definitely very important. I know that's something that Chris helps people obviously with, because he helped you to write this story. So just before you tell your story, which we're going to do in a minute, I'd just like to ask Chris a question about when Ruth came to you with the story and how the process, just to comment just on what Ruth was just saying about helping people to tell their stories and the importance of that, and how the process of writing from your perspective, Chris, as well.
Yeah, I can't actually remember which story we were discussing when this sort of came up. One of the prompts that I share with people who do my business story portfolio coaching is about your real work I think we may have touched on this in previous podcasts, but there's often a tension between real work and paid work. I mean, paid work is obviously the work that pays, and if it's the same as your real work, you're in a brilliant position. But for a lot of us, the stuff that we have to do just to keep going, and there's stuff that we really do enjoy doing and is our real contribution to the wider world. So that's what we were discussing, and I didn't realise that this had triggered this amazing book. And we did do. I looked at a few of the stories, but certainly reading the book, it really is a book of people's experiences, and the work that I do in sort of turning stories into stories you can use for business promotion isn't quite right for this type of book, but I love the stories in it, and I think I learn from all the stories that I read. So that's great, and it's good to know that you can trigger something, and I can say I did this, and I actually didn't do anything.
Yeah,
brilliant.
Yeah, I don't know if we spoke about this before, but I know with my job as well that with creativity, it tends to spark in other people as well. So sometimes I might put a video out and then someone else will say to me, "Oh, I've just written a poem because of the video that you've put out, and it inspired me, to write about this." And I obviously haven't spoke with that person personally or coached them in that moment, but sometimes just the act of creativity or the act of coaching as well can inspire more thought patterns and processes, and actually, especially with coaching as well, it helps people to believe in themselves. And Ruth, I know you write here that you help individuals to build their confidence, so could you just talk a little bit about that aspect as well?
Well, what I do for the day job, if you like, is English tutoring. And whilst a lot of schools concentrate very much on helping students to pass exams rightly and literature, one of the things that I do is I help their English skills. So there's a link between oracy and writing. And for them, where they're lacking in confidence, they might have some quite good ideas in their speech, but they don't always get around to having them supported and then being confident enough to put them in writing. So for the English tutoring, it's very much working on the English skills, which is responding to a piece of unseen reading and creating stories or writing letters, transactional writing, that sort of thing. And very often people just need support to write down their ideas because they're so used to having scaffolds at school that when they're left on their own devices, they do get a little bit confused and they just need that extra support to go to the next level and to get the instantaneous feedback that you get in one-to-one tutoring is absolutely brilliant in terms of their progress, so they can really improve exponentially. And it's just me teasing out of them what they already know and teasing out their ideas and guiding them, putting them in the right direction. So I really enjoy the one-to-one teaching and the one-to-one work. And the one-to-one teaching came after the brand storytelling, if you like, because I developed this way of working on Zoom where I was talking to the 12 ladies who very kindly gave me their brilliant stories for the book and hit upon a method really of using that format of listening and writing down what they've got to say and then, tweaking it and then using that online with students. So it's been a really fun time. I've enjoyed it. It gave me a break from the teaching, and then I went back to it and I found a different aspect of teaching which I always loved, which kind of got squeezed out in the group situation.
Definitely. It's all very, very inspiring stuff, and it feels like you've been on a journey. of sorts, and obviously with the cycling as well, which I know you're going to talk about in your story. So yeah, without further ado, let's get on to your story. So off you go, Ruth.
Okay, I've just got to find it in the book. So
yeah, that's all right.
There's 12 of us in this book.
Yeah.
Now, it was Chris's idea to sort of preface each story with a kind of thumbnail sketch of everyone. So this fits in the third person because everyone else's was, because otherwise it wouldn't fit. So it says Ruth lives on the edge of Sheffield in a village in northeast Derbyshire. She didn't choose to be a cycle reader for Breeze because she was confident. She did it to commit time to cycling. Her life wasn't very adventurous at that point, with the responsibilities of being a 40-something mum, teacher and wife being very demanding of her time and energy. Fortunately, she was about to rediscover herself and find a new sense of freedom. So that's the preface to my chapter, if you like, and that was Chris's idea. I did first go on an adventure with some ladies 6 years ago, and it was a bit of a turning point in my life. So I'll tell you the rest of the chapter without much ado. The whole story, just so that readers know out there, is called In Search of Adventure, short stories about women who cycle. It's not just my story. There are 12 other stories and everybody's completely different and some are much more entertaining than me. Well, they all are, which is why I like talking to them, and I hid my story in the middle. Okay, nevertheless. British Cycling Breeze initiative got women to do things together that we didn't yet have the confidence or strength to do on our own. I loved being a volunteer leader. Women would turn up with all the gear looking for moral support to get started. That was the point of Breeze, to allow women to cycle in a supportive and friendly environment where they could enjoy riding traffic-free routes at their own pace. Enter Supergran, a woman in the group. My dad never let me get on a bike as a kid because I was a girl, but it's something I've always wanted to do. She then needed a quick M-check on her shiny white bike and her helmet altered before I could give her a crash course in cycling. Fortunately, she was amazing. She gripped onto that bike for dear life and gave it her all, spinning like mad. A lifelong ambition realised, Supergran was completely elated. After leading rides for a year, I decided to strike out on my own to see if I could go further afield. It was hard getting started at times, but as soon as I got on the bicycle, I was drifting away along the country lanes. Cycling was a great escape. At work, my teaching methods were being questioned and my workload was being increased. In truth, we were all being squeezed, but it felt very stressful because I was already working at full tilt. At the same time, my marriage was ending after nearly 20 years of us being together, so my home life and my work life were both in tatters. Throughout this difficult period, my parents, my sister, and cycling kept me going. Then, one day, whilst scrolling through Facebook, an image of sunflowers burst into my brain and lifted my heart. It was an advert aimed at the Breeze community for a women-only week-long bicycle tour along Le Canal du Midi in France in the summer holidays. That's it! I'm going! Woohoo! Troubles be gone. I knew I could cycle a reasonable distance on the flat, and I was longing to be somewhere new. The idea of rolling along canal towpaths and country lanes surrounded by new experiences and nature really appealed to me. Plus, it will be all women, so there'd always be someone available to help. The woman leading the French adventure was Indigo Kelly Forrest, or Indy as I came to know her. I thought she'd be dead posh, but she was a down-to-earth northerner with an infectious laugh and a wicked sense of humour. I first met her when she hosted a pre-trip get-together at her house to practice putting up our tents and talk about bike camping kit. I was a bit of a mess that night, tired, confused, grumbling about my job and soon-to-be ex-husband. But I soon perked up after a glass of wine and a giggle with the other women. Indy said, "This is going to be a great journey for you," hinting at the holiday being a transformational experience in a spiritual sense. Inwardly, I scoffed a little. I'm just riding my bike across France. In fact, the holiday brought about a big shift in my attitude. I was determined to navigate my own way, to ride at my own pace, and enjoy the sheer freedom of a full week freewheeling through the most glorious scenery. It was a totally liberating feeling to be able to head in one direction and actually get somewhere with only my own luggage and thoughts. At times it was physically demanding, but it was also ridiculously good fun. I found myself being able to laugh again. A bit of a bloody miracle, that was. The whole experience gave me strength. I managed to take control of my life. Really, it sounds crass, but it's true. Crucially, I reverted back to my maiden name. I regained my identity and started to recover from the heartbreak. I found some wonderful things to love: good company, great food, and cycling. The other thing I fell in love with, and it surprised me a little, was France itself. I'd always wanted to speak another language fluently and struggled with like mad with languages when I was younger. But that year in France, I was overwhelmed by the friendliness of the French people I met along the Canal du Midi. I even managed to understand what was being said and speak a word or two of French myself. With time to notice things all around me, my senses were heightened to absorb the sounds and colours and tastes and reflections. There was an immense beauty in the scale of the landscape. Tall sunflowers as big as my head, and big, big skies, long baguettes, all that kind of thing. It put my problems into perspective. The days were long. It was 50 to 70 miles a day in the heat of the summer. But I always made it with time to rebuild my house, which was a tent, also known as the palace, because it was the biggest one there. And I slept well, for once, for a long time. I got lost at one point where the canal split in two, and I had to choose which prong of the fork pointed the right way. It was the longest day, 3 days into the trip, and I was stretched to my limit, hungry again. I decided to travel totally alone that day, so I was forced into having my wits about me and observing markers in the landscape. Excuse me. Luckily, I got a really strange feeling. 100 metres or so down the track, my senses were on full alert. It felt wrong. The bustling path I'd been following seemed quiet and underused. Then out of nowhere, a French farmer appeared, carrying a shotgun and surrounded by barking dogs. "Turn back! Turn back!" I scratched myself and hoiked the bike around, thinking, thank God I noticed before it was too late. Not immediately after my trip, but a few years later, I conceded with a smile that Indy had been right. Giving myself a week once a year is an incredible freedom, and it gives me the space I need to re-examine myself and change the way I think. Whilst my future may be uncertain, I'm more flexible and resilient. I can make new friends. I'm not too old. I can find a new job. I can change direction and find new hobbies. I can even get fitter. I can change and face the future with hope. Now my children are old enough to start experiencing these kinds of adventures for themselves, and I'm looking back on my journey, surprised at how far I've come. Whilst I got into Breeze, cycling with women, for women, to help other people, being part of that something bigger really helped me enormously, and I wrote my book as a tribute to the power of that great initiative. I do have extra hobbies now, blogging and writing being one of them. And I have, as Chris and you, Jemma, have said today, tried to turn my interests and my passions into a paying job. I admit it's not particularly successful. It's not unsuccessful either. I'm surviving and thriving and I'm enjoying it. And daydreaming about the sunflowers still keeps me going through the long winters like we've had this year. So that's my story, slightly adapted and chapter in my life that keeps me going and sustains me to the future.
Thank you so much. Oh, I loved it. I think that I wrote a few bits that I found really interesting. I loved the fact that Indy had said to you, this is going to be a great journey for you. And you sort of scoffed, and then actually you found that it was. And, you know, the ending as well, of I can change and face the future with hope and be a part of something bigger.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah.
Yeah, sometimes I think I'm a bit of a young fogey, because you know, you when you're out and about, you meet these really fit old people who are still going really strong, and I'm in awe of them. I'm in awe of them. You know, they've had long, successful careers, and then they go on to, you know, have healthy retirements. I think it's in some ways a lot harder to do that now. So all you can do is sort of, you know, do the best you can, adapt as you go along. Obviously, with the coronavirus, it's caused lots of trouble for people in jobs. So we have to kind of find that resilience now, really, because it will sustain us for the rest of our lives anyway. It's not that you can wait to do these things.
Definitely. The other part of it that I thought was really good is just how you take us into the world as well, just this descriptive parts of it. So it really feels as if you're going on that journey with you, and you're cycling yourself and going to the south of France, and it's kind of like it just feels as if you're there, right there. And I think that's the beauty of storytelling done well, is that you feel as if you're there, and it does take you on a journey. So I think you definitely accomplished that with this storytelling.
Thank you very much, Gemma. And that's where I am a lot of the time, in my head as well.
Yeah.
And that's why I enjoy reading so much, other people's stories.
Definitely.
I'm reading about somebody travelling to Australia, a scientist, in Miss Benson's Beetle this week. She goes all the way from London to New Caledonia through the Suez Canal and other places. And I just love the fact that reading, you know, transports you to another place.
Completely, yeah. Chris, any thoughts on the story?
Yeah. I think this is. I think the first thing I would want to say is that I was surprised by this book. I had seen bits of it, not very many bits of it, but certainly bits of it. And but when all these stories are together, they are really inspiring. And just as Ruth's story that we've just heard is a story about overcoming, I don't quite know what word you'd use to describe what you were going through at work and at home at the time. Would depression work?
It's a crossroads. It's a crossroads. Things that were beyond my control, really.
But you were caught up in all of that, and how you were able to grow beyond it through cycling.
Yeah.
Whatever it was, and that. But I mean, and some of the other stories are amazing, and particularly the ones where the barrier they were overcoming was a physical barrier.
Yeah.
And 2 or 3 of the women went through terrible physical illness. And at least one of them was told by the doctors that she'd never cycle again. And she's got on a bike and cycled home.
Two ladies who had, very difficult experiences with their health. One lady who had an accident on her bike. She's actually quite an extreme downhill mountain biker, and she landed on her head and had to be airlifted by the Yorkshire and Lincolnshire ambulance to hospital very urgently, and she had very significant TBI, a traumatic brain injury, and she's still suffering as a result of that today, but she does also work as a nurse, and she does still get about on a bike, an electric bike, and she's, still as active as she can be, so she's done really well to recover from that. Another lady who had overcome another brain injury, where she was, due to the arthritis drug she'd been taken, where she was told that she was going to have a very serious operation that might leave her unable to walk or, move around easily. It might damage her speech, that sort of thing. And she had a long journey with this because she'd been always cycling her whole life with arthritis anyway, and then in her 50s had this problem, which turned out to be a side effect of the drug that she'd been taking. And she had to wait a long time for surgery. And while she was waiting, they re-scanned her with some new equipment and found out that when she'd stopped taking the drug, she didn't actually need the surgery. And it was a real triumph on her part that she and managed to keep going. And actually, when she was in hospital, told not to do anything and wait for surgery, she sneaked out and did a 100-mile cycle ride with her friends because the prognosis was so bad. She just couldn't think of any other way of keeping going, and they really gave her the worst case scenario, which fortunately didn't come about at all.
The thing that amused me about that story was that the reason she had a second, is it an MRI scan?
Yeah.
She had the second one. The reason was they were doing some research and they asked her if she'd be willing to just participate to help with the research. And that's when they discovered that it had gone, whatever it was. And I think she said right at the end, always accept an offer to be the subject of research.
Absolutely. Knowledge is power.
Really lucky.
And keep going whenever you can. Do what you can when you can, and it builds up. And that's what we find in cycling. So a lot of the ladies that turn to cycling, this is after they've had the end of a long career. So very often they've had professional jobs and they've had a family and they've not had any time for themselves at all. They've never made any time. Then they discover cycling later. Because it can be difficult, when you're in your 20s, your 30s, and even your 40s, that you're constantly caring for someone else. You've got a great weight of responsibility. So therefore, getting on your bike and finding sort of childish enjoyment of that is so completely liberating. Even if you're just going down a canal locally or along a river or up out of the city, it doesn't really matter. It still gives you that same feeling. And a lot of women need a bit of encouragement and help to do it, whereas for men, there's less fear around the cycling. So that's what Breeze is about, really breaking down that barrier.
I think you're onto something here, Ruth, that goes beyond cycling. Just to give you a couple of examples, yesterday there was an item on Broadcasting House on Radio 4 about women who climb. And I thought immediately it sounded just like Breeze, but they were mountain climbers, and that one of them was saying that so it's women who climb together, and one of the interviewers said, "Well, does your partner climb?" And she says, "Oh, I keep him firmly on the ground." And a lot of value in women helping one another climb the mountain. So this could be your second book, In Search of Adventure 2, short stories about women who climb.
No, I've already got my idea for the second book.
Well, that's your third book then.
No, I'm not. No, because I'm not a climber. Because part of my philosophy, Chris, is all about doing it slow.
Yeah.
So,
Well, I'm just saying there's a bigger. And then this morning on the Today programme, there was something about women who swim in the wild.
Yeah, that's a huge thing. And massive movement. And
but they're all things about physical exercise, endurance, all those things that they're there in common, and and this type of activity, it also seems to overcome mental issues, emotional issues, physical, a number of physical illnesses. Probably not all, but certainly some. And
it gives you a good community as well. There are networks locally where you can be in touch with people. So you can be in touch with people who you actually meet up with, which is a lovely thing, about the social network. Well, and it is something that we can do now. Obviously, there have been guidelines evolving through lockdown, but taking exercise outside is allowed. I understand up to 6 people. So I think we're back to that level.
Well, it improves bone strength. It improves the immune system. Exercise, and it's and I do. I mean, one option if you're going through trouble is to find a coach or someone who can help you with that that way. But another option might be to find an organisation like Breeze that supports you doing something that you enjoy doing, and to use that as a way of overcoming the other problems.
It's interesting that you mentioned that, because I did go to marriage guidance, and the marriage guidance counsellor actually said, well, what more can you do? And this is the way it is. And then obviously there's no way forward, because I was carrying a lot of the weight, and the person who I was trying to work with didn't want to work with me, which is fine. And then it's the same situation at work when they're really looking for younger staff. Let's make no bones about it. There's nothing you can do about it. You can try your heart out. But when it doesn't work, then you've got to move on. So I had actually seen counsellors for these things, and they kind of said to me, you're all right. So I thought, well, I can't change the situation on the other end. I've just got to move on, and that's what I did.
Yeah, and another thing, it struck me actually, particularly in the very first story. I can't remember the name of the person. Was it Mariam?
Mariam's amazing. She's from Leicester, yeah.
But what struck me about her story was the place. I think she lives in Leicester or somewhere, doesn't she?
Yeah, quite a few of the ladies from down Leicester.
The place where she lives, virtually no one was cycling, and certainly no women were cycling. But she started cycling around the area, and now there's loads of women. And Muslim women, as particularly she mentions, who are cycling around that area. She's almost started a movement or a community. And Breeze itself is a community of women who cycle.
There's
so that's another dimension to this. It builds community as well.
Well, the Breeze Network came about as a result of some research into participation in cycling that happened about 14 years ago. So in about 2009, 2010, they researched cycling, and only something like 500,000 people, women, were cycling regularly. So they looked at the reasons why so few women were cycling regularly. And it was really, fears about safety on the road, because it can be dangerous. Other sort of fears around, maintaining bicycles, cycling alone, that kind of thing. And they decided to create the Breeze Network, and it was going in full strength really for 2012. There was a lot of funding going into all sorts of sports for all sorts of different groups at that time. And they offered training, but it was run entirely by volunteers. So the ladies who lead the rides are volunteers, and they give their time to help other women get out. And Breeze has also been part of one in a million campaign to get 1 million ladies cycling, and I think they actually smashed that ceiling years ago, and they've got nearly 2 million ladies cycling now. So, the 1 in a million campaign, and the other campaign, getting women into sport, ordinary women, I can't remember what it's called now, it's just escaped my mind. This girl can, all that kind of thing is really important to show people of all ages, all backgrounds having a go, and especially reaching out to people who have less access maybe, naturally.
Yeah. And I think there's a dimension to the lockdown and the pandemic that has not really had a lot of attention, not that I've heard, and that is mild grief. So I'm not talking about the grief of people who lost a loved one or whatever because of the pandemic, but there's actually a spectrum of grief, and that sense of I've been locked up for a year, I've not achieved anything, my life's just passing by and nothing's changing, and that can be a sort of mild grieving, but it's still grief. This comes up in my story later on as well, in an extremely mild, but it's still it's still something that's very real. And cycling and the other activities we mentioned is clearly one, or even practically everyone can do, getting out and walking. Is a way of dealing with that, or handling it, or managing it, or whatever word you want to use.
Yeah, there's a really strong connection between cycling and having more positive mental health. In fact, a lot of cyclists say it's impossible to cycle and feel miserable at the same time. That the cycling actually brings about a kind of, change in your brain and body, and it just lifts you up entirely. And I think it becomes addictive as well. You don't have to become sporty. You just have to do it. And for me, I'll go out 2 or 3 times a week now, and I really enjoy it. And if I don't do it, I miss it. So this morning, when I saw the sunshine, a little part of me thought, oh no, do I have to talk to Chris?
Lots of people think that.
Because this is a great time to think about breaking out of the cycle that we've been stuck in, isn't it? Because it's time to spring forward. The sun shines out there. We've got the summer to look forward to, and get our lives back, get our social lives back, and meet up with people in real life. So much as I've embraced all this technology during lockdown, I'm really looking forward to having that real connection again, and physical connection with nature.
Yeah, but there's your slogan for the future: break the cycle on a cycle. That's, I think it's probably time to move on now. And Jemma has been working on, it looks like, changing the world through abundance and well, you explain it, Jemma.
Just before I go on to that, I also want to mention, because you were just talking about women's group and that journey of overcoming things for women. So I'm going to be also in a book of women's stories as well, and I was just thinking about the story that I'm telling, and mine's actually through dance and song is how I kind of healed my mental health things, and I think that's kind of the crux of the journey of. But I always did dance and song anyway. But it's about changing my mindset around it and using it as a healing tool. So I just wanted to say that. I'm sure I'll talk more about that in future episodes when the book comes out. But so I've been looking at this topic of abundance a lot recently, and I've read quite a few books on it and done courses and tried to get my head around why I felt financially insecure and not able to fulfill. I think because there's different levels of, like you were saying about the different levels of grief, Chris, there's different levels of grief when it comes to finances as well. So you can be secure in the sense of, having enough money to live, having enough money to buy food and have some, the basics in life. But then there's also kind of the question of, well, is that enough? And can we do more with money that really helps people? And I started writing this song, and just because a lot of the workshops that I was going to and courses that I did and books that I was reading were talking about abundance in a way of like, well, if you just change your mindset and if you just work hard enough, then you'll get abundance. And I thought, okay, that sounds great. But then I also, it wasn't happening, and it still hasn't happened to the full level. Like, I was kind of, I like the way Ruth put it of like, I'm not, it's not like I've reached that full success, but I am successful. I feel I'm thriving in certain areas creatively, and it's kind of but I still felt like there was a missing piece, or because there's so many people suffering in the world, and there's so much poverty and pain around, not just for people that are poor but also rich people as well, where there's just fear around losing money or not being able to give money away, and it happens all the time sometimes when you're sharing prices and people go, oh, I'm not sure if I've got enough money, and it's kind of like sometimes it's not about whether they have enough money, it's just that they maybe have some unresolved things around the idea of money. So I kind of started to put some ideas down, just questioning, what is abundance? What is abundance to me? What is abundance? What does it mean to be free? Is it so I'm kind of like working around with these lyrics. I'm not sure if these will be the actual, it's a half song at the moment. I might just play a bit on the piano actually, although it's very, very, very new. So if I do make a mistake, that's because it's not a full song yet that's been rehearsed loads of times. But I do want to kind of just share a little bit. I wasn't going to, but so I don't have an intro yet, but this is the chorus and a bit of the verses. So. What is abundance? What is abundance to me? What is abundance? What does it mean to be free? Is it the fields made of gold? Is it a rainbow with a pot untold? Is it in youth or is it in old? Is it in wisdom or what with soul? Tell me, what is abundance? What is abundance to you? What is abundance? What does it mean to be true? Is it the earth being renewed? Is it the birds when they sing their tune? Is it love being restored? Is it in rich or is it in poor? Could we all live with more? Do the angels know what's in store? Do we have to pay a price just to be free and to live our lives? When I look around, I see people up and see them down, trying to make a living wage, to earn their worth, look after their families. Something doesn't seem right. Why does it have to be a fight? There must be a better way. So that's just some ideas at the moment. It's kind of a song. But yeah, so some of the lyrics, like, is it the earth being renewed? Is it the birds when they sing their tunes? Is it love being restored? Is it in rich or is it in poor? Tell me, what is abundance? Yeah. I mean, I've been reading a couple of books. So one is called The Soul of Money. This was after I wrote this song. So I asked the question. I was like, what is it? I really want to know, God. It was literally a question to God, because I was going to do a course and I couldn't afford it. Ironically, I was going to do a course on how to help others with money, because I wanted it to be part of my coaching so that I could help others. And then I couldn't afford the course. So I just asked the question. I thought, well, how can I know what it is for me? I thought, well, songwriting is how I solve things. So, and then I got a couple of books, and one of them is called The Soul of Money by Lynn Twist. And it's called Reclaiming the Wealth of Our Inner Resources. And it's phenomenal. Compelling and fundamentally liberating book, shows us that examining our attitudes towards money, earning it, spending it, and giving it away can offer us surprising insights into our lives, our values, and the essence of prosperity. Through personal stories and practical advice, global activist Lynn Twist demonstrates how we can replace feelings of scarcity, guilt, and burden with experiences of sufficiency, freedom, and purpose. Twist takes an honest and critical look at our extraordinary power that money wields over our lives, and its profound and often destructive influence on our self-image and relationships. In a consumer society that glorifies the pitch, the sale, and insatiable appetite for more as a measure of self-worth, The Soul of Money takes us to a step back to examine our relationship with money, to assess our connection with our core human values, and to change this relationship, and in so do to transform our lives. And yeah, I do feel like when I read it, I was just like, yes, this is it. This is what I've been looking for in terms of understanding what abundance. I mean, it's not the end of my journey with it. I'm very young, but it helped me to realize, okay, it's about using my money for good and being able to change my attitude around how I'm thinking about it, but also to as a society as well. So it's not just about the individual, because I think that's the problem I had with some of the events that I was going to, or courses. It often spoke from an individual perspective of what, it's all about you and your mindset and how you can earn money. And it's like, well, it's not all about me. It's about how can I give back to society and contribute. And this is why what Chris talks about our real work, it's like, how can I use my real work to actually have an experience of abundance? Anyways, talked quite a lot about that, but any thoughts on the song or what I spoke about? I know it's quite a big topic, quite daunting sometimes, but yeah.
Abundance is really topical at the moment, and I think from my point of view, I feel like we're already in the Western world so lucky. We're in the top, I don't know how many percent of people in the world, and our lives are just so luxurious in so many ways. We don't even realize that. So I'm quite happy living a very simple life, and I feel that is abundance in a way, where you can live the way that you want to live, feel that you don't want any more, because I don't actually feel like I want any more. I want more experiences, but I don't want more money as such. I think it's an interesting one.
Just got two images for you, Jemma. One is I often walk alongside the River Don on the 5 Weirs Walk, and when I look down into the river, both sides of the river are covered in plastic, and all sorts of other, and often all sorts of strange things go bobbing along down the river, and I think that's an image of abundance in our society. And the other image is my grandmother had a big tin. I think it had chocolates in it, Quality Street or something like that. And inside the tin, it was full of buttons, masses and masses of buttons. She was always sewing and mending things. And that was and that went right back into her past. because when she and my grandfather first married, which must have been around about the 1920s, late 1920s, they were very poor. My grandfather managed to pay for her to have all her teeth out just after they were married, because that was one way of saving on dental bills. And they had to work really hard. By the time I was born, they were okay. They were doing quite well. But that thrift, of making things stretch and mending things so that they could carry on, that stayed with her pretty much for all her life.
Yeah, I feel like I should have found one of the stories actually to read, because I just realized, like, it's really through the stories that we learn, and there's so many stories in this book where I feel like I want to share, but I don't want to tell it. It's almost like when something's told really well in a book, and then it's almost like you want to tell it right, in the way that it was supposed to. But there is one story where she meets Mother Teresa, and there's a rich couple that comes and interrupts their spiritual moment of holding babies and looking after the babies, and she gets annoyed with them, and then she writes to Mother Teresa afterwards, and she says, my anger is my ability to forgive has not stretched to rich people yet. And then Mother Teresa just says that it's again, I don't want to quote her wrong, but she says that we haven't yet learned to have empathy and compassion towards the rich, but they're suffering too. And I thought that was really profound, and kind of part of the problem is that there is so much pain in all walks of life, and that it's not about how much money you have, but about how you feel about what you have. And a bit like what Ruth was saying before, it's about living a life that you're happy with.
Yeah.
And I think from my perspective at the moment, I do want money, because at the moment, even though I'm very happy with lots of things in my life, I do want to be financially able to buy my own things without having to go to someone else to afford it. And it's not just for selfish reasons. I would like to offer those services to other people, like my songs, recording my songs, or recording facilities like me and Chris. This would be very far off in the future probably, but if I wanted to offer that to my coaching clients or something like that, it's something that needs money is required to do certain things in jobs. So, and I think that's and just to live a free life where I have that freedom. I think that's what I am searching for at the minute, or wanting to create. Not searching for, wanting to create. And I think it's about offering skills and being more available for that to come to me, because it's in the offering of skills, isn't it? And then you receive money for those skills. So but yes, it's been very it's something that weighs on my mind a lot.
Yeah, and it's something that weighs on the minds of a lot of people who are self-employed, who often go into self-employment because they do have a skill or something to share, and then they find that the pressure of just keeping the show on the road is immense, and it's something that we all have to struggle with. But I think we better move on.
To your part. You're going to talk about a story that you've written.
Yes. I've mentioned a few times that one of the people who coaches me is Megan Macedo, and she does a writing challenge every year, and this is the third year that I've done it. and we write 21 stories over 21 weekdays. So it's a story a day, but you get weekends off for good behaviour. And I thought I'd read you one of the stories and see what you think. It's not very long, so don't panic. I've been in hospital overnight for an operation only once. I was 13 or 14 years old, I suppose. I don't remember that much about it, thank goodness. The hospital was the Royal Infirmary on Infirmary Road in Sheffield, and the hospital closed soon after I left, but the buildings still stand. I think it closed when they built the Hallamshire Hospital. I think it was one of the hospitals that sort of moved into there. It's a huge Victorian building, and it's still there. The offices now, with rumours of mysterious subterranean passageways along which patients were pushed on journeys between the various buildings on the site. Or was that just during the war? The thing I most remember about the hospital was the radiator next to my bed. It dripped, gurgled and wheezed all night and kept me awake. I must confess I don't remember the food, but I'm pretty sure it was awful. I remember discussing hospital food with a friend of mine who had been in hospital much longer than I was, around about this same age. We agreed it was dreadful. It's a well-known fact that hospital food is always dreadful. We speculated on the origins of the mince, but that is quite enough of that. Now, a few of my readers who are squeamish are probably relieved because so far I haven't gone into the gory details of my operation. I'm sorry, but you need to know for the second half of this story. I was in hospital to have 2 teeth removed. It's odd that I don't remember being too concerned about the details at that age, but 2 teeth, one in each of my upper and lower jaws, were growing in the wrong direction. That is, not down and pushing out the milk teeth. So this was extreme dentistry, not the stuff of stoic patients bravely facing the drill without numbing. This was full-on deep dive dentistry. I can still feel a small indentation in my upper palate, presumably where something was removed. Softer flesh below, so not so easy to feel the change. I remember I checked myself out of the hospital as soon as I had had the operation, and I asked my parents to bring what I needed to leave. I'd had enough of the infernal radiator and the backache from a couple of days in action. The upshot of this operation were 2 surviving milk teeth, one above the other. They persisted for a long time. I remember once at a checkup at the dental hospital where the dentist, presumably a tutor, called in his students to gather round and have a look. Now we know what excites a dentist. The upper tooth dropped out. I don't remember when, but the lower tooth soldiered on. By last year, it must have been well over 60 years, which is not a bad innings for a milk tooth. But it was getting a bit long in the, it wobbled, and my current dentist x-rayed it, and it had no root. So it had to go. I walked down to the dentist just up the road from the old Royal Infirmary. I hoped the dentist wouldn't have to put her knee on my chest while my plucky little tooth resisted with all its might. But no, it readily complied, and in moments I was toothless. As I left the dentist and started to walk home, it struck me. I hadn't taken a last look at it, paid my respects, fully honoured this tiny servant that had been a part of my life for so long. Then I pulled myself together, told myself not to be silly, and walked on home.
Oh, thank you, Chris. I love the ending where you're just like, I haven't paid my last respect to this tiny servant. That's, it's a lovely way of putting it, and I like you're very descriptive. You go right into the gore, not the gore, but you know what I mean. You describe every bit of it, which I expect nothing less. Ruth, any thoughts?
I just think Chris has got a brilliant memory of his childhood. And I think that's a really interesting and valuable thing to have, because we've got this record through Chris of old Sheffield. And Sheffield, as it was, great industrial city with, you know, a great core of working people and all sorts of industries that had gone on for quite a few hundred years or evolved. It is really important as we go, you know, into this century where work is changing. Important to remember where we were and have an identity with that. So I think that's a brilliant record.
Yeah, but one of the things that it parallels is our lives, because there's a lot I don't remember about that hospital visit. I mean, there was something around the operation, and I can remember part of it, but there's no point in telling the story because I can't remember the point of it. But there's that layering in our lives. We go through certain periods in our lives and then we leave them behind. But there's also layering in our cities, and I mean, the Royal Infirmary is still there, and it's still quite a presence, and it's worth having a look at the buildings. They're amazing. But there was another hospital which I think closed around the same time, presumably for the same reason, and I think it was on Division Street, just a little hospital, which I think is the one that my friend was at. I can remember walking around the site of it with him, but I can't remember exactly where it was. And it could have been West Street.
Now, Chris.
Sorry?
It'll be a trendy bar now.
No, I think it was demolished.
Was it?
Something else built. It's possibly the old Voluntary Action Sheffield building, but I'm not quite sure. I looked on an old OS map, and that part of the map was missing. So, not got very far with that yet.
One of the things I've only just started to really know about Sheffield is how much it is a city of two halves, because I went to the university, you know, over 20 years ago, and I knew quite a lot of the west part of the city. And I knew quite a lot through studying about the other parts of the city. It wasn't until a couple of years ago when I worked in Burngreave that I got to find out more about that side of the city and the actual kind of physical layout of the industrial parts. So, you know, it is very much a city that if you live in the west, you've never been to the east, there's probably still quite a lot to explore, and vice versa. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Sheffield is notorious for not knowing their own city. There's lots of little villages all joined together.
I was just going to say, I don't know if I live in do I live in the west or the east? Is that really bad?
I don't.
I've lived in Sheffield.
Where are you, Jemma? You're right in the middle.
Yeah, you're in the middle. Yeah.
Probably.
I didn't want to say, I last time we spoke about places, and I talked about a book about the area, but I didn't want to say my area. Now I've just said it on but it's okay. People don't know the place exactly, but you know, it feels a bit vulnerable to sort of talk about the area, even though, because I suppose Sheffield's quite small, isn't it? Really?
No, it's the biggest city in area outside of London.
Yeah, but once you start talking about areas, it gets small, doesn't it?
It's not the biggest in population, but it's biggest in area.
Yeah.
London's bigger, but that's it.
Yeah.
Interesting that you were talking about walking along the Don, Chris, because like you say, the Don is a real eye-opener going on that walk. And the history what used to be there, and like you say, what's there now, it's rather dilapidated, sadly. And it reminds me of that scene in The Full Monty when they're in the river on the tipping cars going down there, you know, seeing that opening scene, which they also did in the theatre absolutely brilliantly. it was so brilliantly balanced the way they did it in the theatre.
Yeah, you can definitely see there's parts of Sheffield when you watch that film, and then you go, "Oh, I know that bit, and I know that bit."
Yeah.
I know it's funny because I know the young guy that played the little boy in Full Monty. Yeah, but I know him as an adult. So, and his mum used to teach me like prop making as well. So, yeah, it is when you start to like, it is it's not a small city, but once you get into like the art world, I suppose it is
all the little bits are small.
Yeah.
Yeah,
what was I going to say? Okay. So Ruth, if people want to find out more, we're kind of wrapping up the podcast now. So if people want to find out more about your work, your book, what you do, how can they do that?
I have two websites. My copywriting and tuition website is www.goodapplecopy.com. And my Just for Fun Slow Cycle website is www.slow-cycle.com. You can contact me through any of those pages. I'm also on Facebook as Ruth McIntosh Brand Storyteller, and I'm on LinkedIn. So any of those things will get to me, and just drop me an email. It can be anything about life writing, about brand storytelling, writing up testimonials for you by interviewing your customers, anything at all. Obviously, English tuition is my main business at the moment. I'm offering that through Tutorful, so that's also a Sheffield business. If you would like some tuition, have a look on Tutorful and see what I offer.
Thank you. And Chris, how about you?
How about me? I'll leave. All these details will be in the show notes. I'll leave details of telling stories, making business, which is my main way of sharing storytelling with people. And we've got a program to pretty much to the end of May now. If anybody listening to this would like to have a go at telling a business story to business people and getting feedback, then ask me about that. I'll also leave a link for all the podcasts that we've done so far, so you can have a look through those and see whether any of them appeal. So that's me. How about you, Jemma?
Yep, and I am online as Jemma Rosenthal if you want to hear more of my music on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, all the different sites. I just almost played my keyboard. And then also I have a business called Creative Hearts, which is coaching. So I do life coaching, one-on-ones for anyone that wants to improve their creative output in life. And I also do Find Your Voice sessions every fourth Friday of the month. So they're group sessions, and that helps you to find your voice. So that is me, and I think we're pretty much done for the podcast. Any last words, anyone? So thank you so much, Ruth, for coming on our podcast. And check out the links, everyone, if you want to know more about Ruth, know more about me and Chris. And we will see you next time.
Thank you very much for having me, and Chris for getting me started at finally writing my book and getting it published.
Okay. Thank you, Ruth, and goodbye.